Hi guys, welcome to class. We are going to be starting our Sketchup unit. This unit is a number of modules put together to learn the software, navigate through the interface, and make a couple of models. There are a number of 3D softwares out there. This is a free software which you can get through sketchup.com. We also have access, and we will be using the school version of this, which was a little bit different than the kind of publicly available site for SketchUp. So what you'll notice is you're gonna have to go through a special way to get there. The instructions for that are on the Introduction to 3D tab, okay? And you'll go through this process here, but I'm gonna show you that as well. You can just always reference this if you need to. What we're gonna be working on today is creating a 3D house. It looks like this, and we'll be learning the interface as we go. First thing you need to do is open up your Google, so log into your browser, so that you have this up in the top right here, the waffle. You want to click this and go to the very bottom of this list here, and you're going to see SketchUp for Schools. Okay, that's what you want. Click on that. It looks like this. Just getting a sense of what we're looking at here. This is a slight different interface than the interface that is used for the publicly available site. This is specifically called SketchUp for Schools, and it's just a little different. So if you're watching any tutorials on YouTube and you notice it's a little different, that's because it is a slightly different software. Okay, so let's just quickly take a quick look around what we have here. The main difference is in the other version of this, the main or the full version of this, there is a top menu up here. Many of those tools exist either here in this toolbar here on the left, or alternatively on the right side in this menu bar. You'll notice that if I click here, I have access to more tools. So if you're ever looking for a tool and you can't find it, there's a chance it's been put into this submenu here. You can also pick up and move objects into or out of your menu by clicking and dragging them into the main menu, and they'll show up here. You'll also find that as you use tools and make changes with objects, it'll update the bottom list here, which is your recently used tools. Okay, let's take a quick look at this sidebar over here. The first thing we're going to do is look at measurements. So at the very bottom right here, it says measurements, and the default is inches, and we're going to change that. So we're going to click over here to info, and we're going to go down here to length units. We're going to change this here from architectural to centimeters. We're going to change to display precision to 0.00 centimeters, and we're going to change length snapping to 0.1 centimeters. Okay, that's just going to update how accurate we can get, and that's how we want that to look. For the rest of these, we can change here area units to square centimeters, and the rest we will leave for now. Okay, I'm going to close this. You can either hide this, okay, or when you open this up, you'll notice that this is the model info. If I click any other one of these items, if I click on view, you notice now I have two tabs. One is here, display, and there was the other, which I will scroll down to, that we are just working on. So this opens up whichever of these objects in this right side panel in a larger list here. If you want to hide or close any of them, you can close individual modules like this, or you can hide the entire thing. And when you open it up again, it'll bring back everything you were using. Okay, for now, I'm going to close everything because I don't need any of these, and we're going to get started. The first tool we're going to use is the rectangle tool. So I'm going to look over on my menu over here. You'll see that also this has keyboard shortcuts. So where it says rectangle in brackets, it says R here. So if I click R on my keyboard, it's going to select that tool. To work with SketchUp, what you want to do is you're gonna have a slightly different user experience depending if you have a mouse, if you have a 2 or a 3 button mouse, or if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, or if you're using a laptop with a touchpad. Each of those interfaces can be a little bit different on how you use the software. My recommendation is to get your hands on a 3 button mouse. That makes the software the easiest in terms of navigation. There are a couple of tools that are worked into the mouse button and the scroll wheel that make it easier to navigate. To get started, whatever you're using, whether it's a mouse or a mouse pad or whatever, if I click, I'm going to start drawing. I've just clicked once and you'll see it starts drawing a rectangle. Okay, I'm going to click again to finish my rectangle. Again, I'm going to click to start my rectangle, click to finish my rectangle. That's going to be the same for pretty much any object that you make in SketchUp. You click to start, click to finish. You'll also notice that as I click and drag, at the bottom right corner where I mentioned measurements, it's actually now giving me real world measurements. Okay, so anything that I draw in SketchUp has a real world scale, and that is demonstrated at the bottom right here. Okay, we're going to click on the eraser tool, which is this one here, and I'm just going to erase any lines or any objects that I don't want. Okay, and we're going to get rid of all those lines. You can also use the selection tool, which is here, to either click on an outer edge, what's called a segment, or the body of an object. Notice that these are separate items. If I click on these lines here, these are the outer edge of my object. This is the body of my object. I can click on this and delete it. It'll get rid of the fill because I've gotten rid of the outer edge here. I can also, I'm going to go undo. Okay, there's an undo button here, or you can hit Command Z on your keyboard or Control if you're on a PC. I can also use the selection tool to either double click and select the whole object or click and drag around the whole object. To get rid of it, I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard and I get rid of that. First thing we're going to do is create a rectangle, and we're going to use another tool called push pull. This is here, the keyboard shortcut is P. Click on push pull, and again, it's going to be a push or click to start and click to finish. And you can see that now I've made an object in 3D. I can now orbit my scene and move around to see how that looks. If you look here in your toolbar, there's an orbit tool, which the keyboard shortcut for which is O on your keyboard, O for orbit. And I can click and rotate, or not rotate, I should say orbit my view of my object. And you can see that this is a 3D object that was pushed and pulled. Let's go back to this push-pull tool. You can use push-pull to literally push and pull any flat surface. So I can create an object and then modify it by pushing and pulling the different, what are called faces in my object. Let's go back to the rectangle tool. I'm going to make a box here, and you can see that depending on where I navigate to, I've only clicked once to start my object, my square rectangle, and you can see that by moving my mouse around, I get some different options on where that is going to be referenced, where the starting point and the end point of my object are going to be. I'm going to click here to finish, and now I'm going to go to push pull. If I click on any face, I can now push or pull that face in or out. That's true of any new face that's created, where I have control over how thick or far or close any of these objects is. I'm going to now go over to the circle tool. This is the circle tool here. If I put my cursor on any face, you'll see that it shows up either green, red, or blue. Those colors, green, red, and blue, are a reference to this axis here. Okay, this blue, green, and red. And so that's saying that this circle will be about the red axis, this would be about the blue axis, and this would be about the green axis. I can again push pull any shapes that I want by clicking to start and clicking to finish. We're also going to learn to navigate this system. I'm going to go down to my navigation tools, which are down here. We talked a little bit already about orbit. There's another tool called pan, and the other tool we're going to use is zoom. These are our navigation tools. Orbit, I can click on orbit, and as we saw previously, I can click and orbit my scene, which changes my view. I'm orbiting around the full 360 degrees in whatever direction I want to move, up or down around my object. I can use the pan tool to move my scene left and right, and this is like panning a camera from left to right. Finally, I have a zoom tool where I can zoom out or in by clicking and dragging, okay, up or down, okay, or I can use a combination of these tools. So I can click on orbit, I can then click on zoom, I can then click on pan and move around my scene. If you were using a mouse rather than a trackpad, you'll have a set of tools which are slightly easier for navigation. So I'm using a 3-button mouse, which means I have my normal left click, I have my right click, and then I have my scroll wheel. I can use the scroll wheel to do a couple things. If I scroll up and down, I can zoom in or out of my scene. I can also put my cursor on a specific part of my object and zoom into that object or that area and zoom out, or go to a different area and zoom in. So this gives me a lot more control with where I'm zooming to and where I'm zooming from. I can also use that center mouse button, the scroll wheel, to click, and that shortcuts my interface to go to the orbit tool without losing the tool I was using. I was just using the pan tool. Okay, if I click and hold, I get the orbit tool, and as I drag, I get to orbit my scene. When I let go of my center mouse button, I return to the tool I was using. So that is a way to navigate and move around a little bit more simply than going back and forth between your model and the navigation tools. There are also keyboard shortcuts. So if you want to go O for orbit, you can do that. If you're using a trackpad, it might be easier to use keyboard shortcuts in combination. So O for orbit. The zoom tool is Z. Okay, I'm going to zoom and then I can zoom in or out of where I'm going to. And if you're ever not sure about what the keyboard shortcuts are, you can just leave your cursor here and they'll show you for all of them. H for pan, and I can move left and right. Okay, so that's how we navigate. Let's use our tools to make a little something. So I'm going to click using my selection tool. Okay, I'm going to click and drag over my entire model and delete it. I'm also going to delete this guy because we don't need him either. He's just a point of reference. We're going to make a house. The house again looks like this, and I encourage you to have your house look as much like this house as possible. I often see students who will embellish their work or change their house, and that's fine to do in a separate file. But what you submit to me, to my course, you need to have match as closely as possible what you see here. And the idea there is if I see a number of modifications or you omit something, it's hard for me to tell whether you didn't understand it, you weren't paying attention, or if you're just getting, excited and embellishing. So for any submission, for any assignment that you're doing, you'll try and make everything as close as possible to what you see in my tutorials. You'll have plenty of time to embellish as we get more comfortable with the software, and you can certainly make an additional file and work on that at any time. Okay, those are fine to put into your portfolio. Okay, so let's continue. We're going to orbit my scene a little bit here, and I'm going to make a rectangle. That's going to be the base. I'm going to orbit just a little bit more here, and then I'm going to push-pull that up into 3D space. I'm just going to reorient myself here. I'm going to find what's called an inference point. So I'm going to go to the line tool here, and you'll notice that when I put my cursor at different points around the model, I get these little pop-ups that tell me that I'm either on face, I'm on an edge, I'm at an end point, and I can also find a midpoint. There's a number of these. These are kind of the most commonly used, and we'll learn more as we get into more complicated work, but these are helpful for navigating or for making really accurate measurements and accurate models. So I'm going to go to the midpoint here, find the midpoint, and I'm going to click to start a line. Now notice that the line snaps to a blue line, a green line, or a red line, which you can't see there, a red line, okay? And these, again, are referencing those axes that we saw, okay? So that tells me that I'm moving horizontally, or I'm moving parallel to the green axis. I'm gonna move all the way back, and you'll notice if I don't stay in that green line, if I get off a little bit, that's no longer in line or parallel to that axis. I wanna make sure that this green line is maintained all the way through, okay? I'm gonna do this incorrectly so you can see. When I do that, if I orbit, you can see that's no longer in line as I thought it was. Sometimes with perspective, it's a little tricky to tell where you are. Okay, so I'm going to find that midpoint and click straight to the back here. And you'll notice if I get it right, I get a midpoint on the back there as well. And now when I orbit, you can see that's accurate. Okay, so I knew it was because I had that green line. I'm now going to take the selection tool, and remember that I can click on faces, or I can also click on these segments. I'm going to click on this middle segment, and I'm going to go to the move tool, and I'm going to move this up. Now, that looks pretty good, but what you'll notice is when I orbit, I wasn't very careful, and so this is not in the middle. Okay, let's undo that and try it again. What I want to do now is when I go to move, I'm going to click up, and you'll see there's a blue dotted line that shows up. That dotted line is telling me that I'm staying straight up and down parallel to, my move is parallel to the blue axis. Okay, there are a couple of tools that will help you stay accurate, and this is one of them. Okay, so I'm going to move up to here, click to finish my movement. And now when I orbit, you can see that's much better. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a chimney. So a chimney is going to be, there's a couple ways to do what we're going to do here. I'm going to take the line tool and let's just sort of get a sense of how this line tool works. I'm going to click on face, which means that the point that I'm making is not arbitrarily in the air somewhere, but it's actually on this face. So if I click here and I click away from it, that's my line. That is now, and hit escape. You can see that is now attached to the face because that's where it started. Okay, I'm going to undo. I'm going to click here to start, okay? And you'll notice I'm going, in some kind of lines here, and I'm going to go a line here, and I'm going to go a line here. And it's a little tricky to tell because in 3D space, it's sometimes a little challenging to tell what you're doing because what looks like it might be attached to the face may not be based on where you moved and clicked to. Okay, I'm going to undo that, Command Z. And what I want to do is I want to pay attention to these inference points. These are why these are valuable. I click on face and I start my line and I want to go straight up because what I'm trying to do is make one edge of a chimney, which I'm going to push and pull into 3D space, just like I did with my original box. So right now I'm on the blue axis, which means my line is straight up and down. If I orbit, you can see, okay, that's straight up and down. I now want to go in line with this red axis so that that's going to match or be parallel to red axis. I'm then going to go straight down using the blue. Okay, there's the blue line as well. I click there on face and then I close up my shape. And now when I orbit, you can see that that is right in line with the object that I attach it to on face, which is this face over here. Okay, I'm then going to take my push-pull object and I'm going to push-pull this into 3D space. And now my chimney is looking pretty good. That's one way to do it. I'm going to go grab the eraser tool and just show you that there are multiple ways to do any of these kind of actions. I can also take my pencil tool here or my line tool. I'm going to get in line with this edge here. So I'm going to be on edge. I'm going to click and go straight up in the blue axis, over in the red axis, again down in the blue axis. And then I'm going to push pull this shape to where I want it and push pull this shape to match. This creates two extra lines here. I'm going to use the eraser tool and erase both of those so that this larger shape here, the larger face we had here, doesn't have any extra geometry. As often as possible, we want to reduce any extra geometry to simplify our models as much as possible. We call that healing. So anytime I take any line or any face, edge, okay, any of these faces that have, these are called coplanar because these are they're in the same plane. So this and this are two separate faces right now, but if I go erase and I get rid of that line, this heals that surface and it puts it back to one object. Okay, we're gonna do a couple of small moves here just to finish up our house. I'm gonna create a little step here. I'm gonna create another one above it. Now we're kind of doing this, I'd say arbitrarily in terms of measurements. We'll be learning measurements later, but for now, I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to pull out a step here. I'm going to push this one a little bit here. I'm going to heal this edge right there. I'm going to create a door using my rectangle tool. Right there, I'm going to push pull this in just a little bit. I'm going to draw a window over here. And I'm again going to push pull this in. All right, once we're done with this, we're going to orbit our scene to a position that we like. Okay, I don't want this to be like this because I can't see it. What I want to see is I want to be able to view all of this so that when I make an image of this, I can put this on my portfolio. So once you get to this point, the next step is to take this file and do two things. We need to save it. So I have the model, and I also need to output a PNG to put on my website portfolio. So first, we're going to click on Untitled, and it's going to ask you where you're going to save it. You're going to save it in your drive, okay, and you're going to give it a name. You should name all of your projects based on the name of the unit again. Okay, so this is going to be unit 4.1. This is what you're going to name this object. Okay, and notice that I've created my image here to do that. Once you've saved all of this, right, you're then going to go here to this hamburger menu here, and you're going to say that you want to download a PNG from my Wix website. Okay, so let's see how that goes. I click on PNG. It's going to open up this interface. Now notice here, this is 2,500 pixels by 1,224 pixels. That's quite large. So we're going to make this smaller. But what I want to do is I want to lock what's called the aspect ratio. I don't want this to get cropped. So I'm going to click this icon up here, which is going to lock it. So when I change this to 650 and hit enter, you're going to see that it updates the height to match the aspect ratio. Once I'm happy with that, I can, and notice you can also still zoom in and out here. If you're not happy with your orientation, you still have controls, and then you can hit export as PNG, and that will give you a PNG file for you to put into your website. Okay, if I go to this portfolio and I want to once you get to the portfolio, go and find our course. I'm just going to click on here. Okay, and you're going to go add to portfolio. Click here and navigate to where you have it saved, and then you'll be able to upload your file. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and I hope it's simple enough. Spend a little time on that. You can then save your work and go return to SketchUp if you'd like, to then make another file and play with the software as much as you want, and then move on to the next tutorial. Okay, good luck.